It upsets me how often there's something with a ton of potential in Pokemon that completely falls apart. In this case, it's Pokemon TCG Pocket, and there's a lot of problems that quickly become evident when you're playing the game. The first one being that you can blow through all of the free missions, you can do the advanced missions, you can play solo battles, and have nothing to show for it, despite opening dozens of packs. I was able to open like 50 packs in the first 2 days. I didn't even have half the cards I wanted to build a competent deck. And that has a lot of problems behind it because there was a beta version of this game that people were able to play for a month. So going and playing battles, you can't, because you're just going to go up against someone that's been playing for a long time and already has a completed deck. I'm more mad at the developers to allow this through the beta and not make it to where, like, oh, you just can't play money, it's a testing ground, and then everything is going to be wiped and everyone's on an even playing field, because tons of people broke the TOS to play the beta early, and then it just became like, oh, now they have fully stacked out decks that no one else can get. I'm more upset at that than people spending money to accelerate their deck building, because it's going to be a smaller portion of players, and even then, like, you can spend $50 in the first day and not be as established as someone that got early access to the game. And I'm also really mad that the developers of, like, Pokemon mobile games keep on doing this, and they give you, like, sneak peeks into early access. And then the insulting thing is nothing comes out of the test for the sake of balance, and the game is still incomplete, that there's no ranked mode, and trading hasn't been enabled yet. So it was like, what was the point? I guess for like a network test, but that network test is going to be fraudulent when you have so many people signing up outside of their region. And then that gets into the other issue with the game, which becomes very apparent, even in like solo battles, or once you kind of build a decent deck and start trying to play the game. The balance is absolutely horrendous, and there's already tons of discussions like, wait, is there any benefit to going first? Like, going first feels terrible, which makes the game feel extra weird compared to the TCG, because the consensus is you pretty much always want to go first. You can build decks and strategies that go second, but the rule of thumb is always go first. In general, always go first, especially if you have evolution Pokemon. And there is like a different switch on the mindset, and there is some like different ways you can play into the first and second turn shenanigans going on with Pokemon TCG Pocket. But it's also really weird that you can't attach energy for the sake of balance. So it's not like, oh, I go first, I play an energy, and I just snowball and auto-win my 3 points. But it's the other way around, where it's like, well, I go first, I can't do anything, and now I lose because they're going to be snowballing on me first. And then the rules are different to where you can play supporter cards on the first turn, and that leads to really weird and jank broken stuff towards like, how did Misty make it to launch? Please tell me, because you can insta-win the game that you drop an EX Pokemon, so a basic EX Pokemon that does 80 damage, you roll Misty, you flip some coins, you Blizzard their basic Pokemon because they can't evolve it, and if they didn't get any others to put on the bench, you just win the game. Even if you don't win the game, you now get to one-shot everything they're trying to build up, or you have an incredible tempo advantage, or you can flip tails, and now you have the losing start of going first. So I think that's another problem with the game, is like, the RNG is so laughable. That, like, if you watch my first battles I did, I lost because I got stun-locked by a Pincurchin 5 times in a row after flipping tails on my Misty, but then I won my next game because they played Misty, got tails first, so they didn't get to attach any energy. I attached 3 on my Articuno, won the game on the spot. So now, these are dominant strategies that somehow made it to the release of the game. And then there's also just, like, other ridiculous, blatantly overpowered cards where Starmie pretty much 2-shots everything in the game, and you play Staryu, you put an energy, you evolve it, you put an energy, and now your Starmie is ready to go incredibly quickly. That's also why it's really good. Like, your opponent goes first, alright, Staryu energy. They go second, they only have 1 energy, now 2 Starmie that's doing 90 and one-shotting them, and because you went first, you're going to be behind on energy, and you have no ability to one-shot the Starmie, so it takes out your Pokemon you're trying to evolve, anything you're building up, or potentially your EX Pokemon by doing 180 damage. And everyone has already immediately identified that the only positive to going first is playing Misty, so you kind of have to play a water deck in case you win the coin toss, which should be a good thing. That's another problem with the coin toss. You don't get to decide who goes first. Not like, oh, I win the coin toss, I want to put them at a disadvantage so they can go first. No, like, you win the coin toss, which should be your advantage for getting the call, and then you just auto go first and you have a higher chance of losing the game. But it's also weird that you can play supporter cards while going first, but it's only an advantage for like one kind of deck. And there's also like some other things people are saying where, you know, you guys win your games when going first. It just comes down to the RNG where it's like, okay, in general, going second is better, but it's never impossible or close to impossible to win because you need to rely on your opponent completely bricking and getting unlucky. So if you're unlucky enough to go first, you just have to hope that their luck is worse with their draws and everything else that happens in the game. That sounds like fun and balance. There's also some strategies that kind of come into play for going first, like if you draw a red card, you can red card your opponent and make them -1. There's some Pokemon that do better because like evolutions into abilities or something. Executor EX is really strong going first because you evolve it, you put it, and then you have an EX Pokemon that attacks on 1 energy and just starts taking off. So Executor EX or Weezing. But the thing is, like, you have no control or autonomy over this if you win the coin toss. So if you're playing a going first or a going second based deck, winning the coin toss has no impact on you trying to play into that for your advantage, and then you could just have a much more difficult game for no reason. I've found the beginner toggle to be pretty useless. Lots of Mewtwo and Gardevoir decks. I heard most people just use beginner because it's the fastest queue times. I did beginner. I went up against Starmie Articuno EX. Real fun. Real cool. There's no ranked, MMR, and no way to stop abuse of the beginner system, which you don't want all of the net decking players in because then none of the new players are going to stick around or want to play anymore because they get bullied out. Real cool game. Also, the balance of some of the other cards. Pretty ridiculous that Venusaur gets 190 hit points and heals 30 and has a trainer card that can heal an extra 50 while doing 100 damage on 4 energy. So it takes a long time to ramp up, but you can just kind of like hide behind fat Pokemon and do it. And then there's nothing that can really be done once the Venusaur EX is set up. And there's not enough like cards and utility and tools in the game to prevent some of these things from happening. So I guess, like, yeah, when you look at it, it's not like there's only 2 playable decks. There's a couple of other playable decks. There's some strategies you can involve, and there's a more complex rock, paper, scissors, but there's also more RNG influencing how that plays out. And then some Pokemon are just more ridiculous than others. You put a basic Pikachu EX down, so basic EX Pokemon having absurd power, 2 energy cards. So actually going second, like a going second Pikachu, what do you do about it? Because he has the energy advantage, fills the bench, and just does more damage instantly than anything, and is very difficult to one-shot while you're trying to set up a Pokemon that needs 3 or 4 energy to accomplish that, but it has the win on 2 by going second. And it's also just the problem of EX Pokemon in general, that the dominance of basic EX or one-stage EX Pokemon it's all you need. Just fill your deck with those, and that's also where like the water-type decks come into play, where it's like you just run 2 Articuno EX, 2 Starmie EX, Misty, you don't need anything else. And because you're only playing for 3 points, you can lose an EX Pokemon, and then you can lose an EX Pokemon. So it's like you're playing with 4 points versus the opponent's 3 if they have regular non-EX Pokemon, they're just getting KO'd. So like losing a regular Pokemon in EX is the same as losing 2 EX. These are EX overpowered and have the 2-point stipulation for a reason, and then there's no drawback to just loading with EX. So, I mean, like, you should only be allowed 1. You should only be allowed 1 named EX of a Pokemon instead of 2, so it doesn't break the normal card limit. How is that? Because that means it's going to be harder to draw that Pokemon. It also means you can't just stack 2 Starmie and then just trade where it's like, Starmie gets the KO, they KO, you revenge, Starmie gets the KO, you win. Like, you just have those kind of exchanges, and there's not really much else that can be done about it. There's a lot of things that need to be like sorted out and tested and fixed with a balance that having a beta did nothing for. And again, like I said in the beginning of the video, an issue is also just like getting the cards to build decks. So you can't even like get to that position to find out the power, and then someone that just got like luckier than you gets to one-shot you with a Misty Starmie combo or something like that. Also, Lapras seeing a lot of play because again, drop a basic Pokemon, RNG flip the game on Misty. If you get like 2 off of Misty, eventually your Hydro Pump just goes into 90 damage on a basic Pokemon, and that's it. Anything that accelerates energy is also just going to be super strong in a speed format. So it's like, oh yeah, Gardevoir Mewtwo, that eventually you just deal 150 damage, and then you can deal 150 damage the next turn. So like you take out an EX Pokemon, you take out a basic Pokemon, and then you just win the game in 2 turns once you get set up on like turn 4 or something. Because like once you get that Gardevoir evolved and Mewtwo on the field, nothing can be done about it. And also, the amount of items is a complete joke. We also don't have any Pokemon tools. We don't have any anti-EX abilities or items or things that can like give normal Pokemon advantage to offset that 4-point versus 3-point disparity and just EX dominant decks. How did this not get tested or found out at all? Also, a Pokeball just being able to automatically randomly fish for one of your basic EX Pokemon, which is 2/3 of your deck if you don't get it. And then just a lot of useless ones. Like, what does looking at the top 3 cards of your deck do? When the draw power is limited to Professor Oak being draw 2, and you can only play that as your one supporter, and you'd rather be playing Sabrina or Misty or Erica instead of draw power to go +1. Now, I do think X speed is really strong because of just, like, trying to preserve a Pokemon and not giving your opponent a point. And I think Hand Scope into Red Card is also pretty good. Like, while it can reduce your amount of options that you have to play, if you scope out a Misty and they're trying to go second and just Misty one-shot you, well, then you can at least, like, Red Card that and hope that they don't get a Misty again, instead of blind Red Carding them into their Misty when they didn't draw it. So because the energy generation is going to be slow, like a Fossil can soak one of the attacks while you're trying to set up a later stage EX Pokemon or a high energy Pokemon, they can just discard it without losing a point. And maybe there's some tech there. Also, Amistar does seem pretty decent as a Pokemon, so like it gives you options, and it also is just like filler, where it's like, yeah, these are basic Pokemon that are non-committal and might not be able to get sniped out as easily, so you can just discard them. There's also probably a little bit more tech or experimentation, the game hasn't really been out for that long, that can develop, but overall, like, dominant play strategies are already becoming, like, annoying and stupid, and sometimes you just lose, like, the RNG is the biggest thing, where it's like, you just lose to RNG, and you just lose to the person pulling more EX Pokemon than you in the first week, which is very fun gameplay. Now, in theory, the problems with this do get lessened over time, and maybe more rock, paper, scissors develops, or there is going to be a little bit more strategy exploration going on. That's not how modern gamers work. Modern gamers just net deck, and then if they don't win by just copying people and not developing any kind of strategy or game sense for themselves, they quit. Gamers don't tough it out through the tough parts of the game anymore. This isn't 2011, 2012 when your friend's like, look, you're going to get absolutely stomped for like the first couple dozen games in League of Legends, but then it becomes really fun. And this also doesn't have like that collaborative aspect of like you can have a friend carry you through the really terrible feeling moments. So like there's no satisfaction and reward to getting a couple weeks in, to getting to the point where everyone's decks are more balanced and maybe like other strategies at least kind of disperse out and homogenize. So like right now it's just like, okay, cool. Wallet diff and beta diff is going to stomp people on very RNG flip decks. That actually, the more you look at it, the more egregious it gets. This is a second place winning deck. It's just playing 2 Articuno EX. That's the entire strategy, is 2 Articuno EX. This is what I mean. We're like, oh, the development. You have the scope into red carding their Misty, and then you Misty yourself. And then, since there's no limit on EXs, you're playing with 4 points versus their 3 if they're not running this, and you don't need anything else. You lose Articuno, well, then you bring in your next Articuno, and you're going to lose if it wasn't that situation anyways. And because there's such a limited selection of playable cards, I guess Pokedex as filler works, because at least if you know the next 3 cards coming, you can kind of like strategize and plan it, where it's like, oh, I've got a Sabrina coming, so I can play for this setup, or I've got an X-Speed coming, so I might be able to get a free swap out, so I should stack up my other Pokemon or something. So there's that, but that's only because of the flaws within the games and the card selection, because when you only have a couple of good playable cards that just stomp out any other strategy, it doesn't matter that you have over 200 cards when most of them can't even be played. It's like the Pokemon VGC, that instead of like strategy getting more diverse, it actually just kind of like centralizes, and then people only play 10 Pokemon, the other 1,000 don't exist for competitive. Why even print an evolution Pokemon that can get one-shot by an EX that takes 3 energy to do 80 damage? Like, you have to put in abilities. You actually have to... Like, the power creep has already come in and made 85% of the cards unplayable, if not just actually straight up more than that. And the thing is, if some of these major issues didn't make it to release, there's actually some pretty interesting power level in the game overall, where it's like... There's always going to be dominant strategy. There's always going to be, like, OP, S-tier things, just because there's going to be something best. But again, when something is, like, way too oppressive and way too crazy, where it's like, you just play 2 Articuno and you win the game, that's That's crazy. Instead of actually like trying to fight and trade with the opponents and slowly grind out battles and, you know, maybe actually have to like retreat at a strategic time and preserve damage on your bench so that way you don't have to lose too many points. But it's like, no, there's nothing you can do about the things that are winning. They just come in and they sweep. And you can't have that in TCG that's supposed to be sped up and only has 3 points. I don't really know what else to say. Like, these are the problems that just become immediately apparent from even the solo battles or just a couple of versus battles. And there's not much you can do about it. And it's not fun. And again, like, the bigger issue is that it's going to take a while for this game to hit a state of potential fun. But by then, you've already lost pretty much all of your player base. And then there's no recovering for the game, even though it, like, eventually ends up good, like many games end up. And the first event being a complete joke doesn't help either, to where it's like, cool, I can get shop tickets and not buy any cards or not do anything to kind of catch up to other players or at least have a playable deck in the first week of trying to play this game. I get some backgrounds and a terrible Meowth and a Chansey card, depending on the Wonder Pick and stuff. I'm really glad I'm playing this game, even though like there was a lot of potential where, oh yeah, I just want to play fun, simple Pokemon TCG with my friends. Well, if no one's having fun, no one's playing it, so you don't have any friends to just kind of chill with in this game. Again, I kind of blame the community for never giving things a chance and actually, like, understanding to play through the mechanics, and then only trying to, like, rush into the meta and then make everything all stale. But then, like, the devs making horrible decisions by having certain groups of players be allowed to play early, violate TOS, have, like, these weird beta tests, that then change nothing about the game and its issues on launch that kill the game even faster. Real cool. I'm having fun. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.